Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. We are entering the third week of the U.S. And Israel war in and against Iran. And oil prices, of course, have spiked and continue to be high as the Strait of Hormuz remains impassable for anyone the Iranians are trying to target. Their own tankers are continuing to get through, and that means that they're making money. The Islamic Republic. It also means that some of that oil is getting out into the global markets. There's a fair amount of oil from the Gulf that is getting out via pipelines and through the Red Sea, for example. Saudi Arabia with millions, about 5 million barrels a day that's getting out through their pipeline. The UAE gets a couple million barrels out through their pipeline. There have been a couple of tankers, Indian tankers, for example, that have gotten through on the back of a deal with Iran. So the strait is not closed, but most of the shipping, and that means oil, gas, fertilizer, petrochemicals, all of that, most of the shipping that leaves the Gulf is shut down. And the ability of the United States to reopen it is not there anytime soon, because it's not just about the Iranians sending missiles, it's about drones, which they have tens of thousands of, and which they can produce more of even under wartime conditions, as the Ukrainians have, for example. And so that means that the shippers and the crews and the insurers are not willing to transit the Strait of Hormuz, even if they have guarantees from the United States. Now, right now, almost all of the naval capability that the United States has in the Gulf is being used to defend American bases, Gulf targets, energy infrastructure, that kind of thing, which means they don't even have the naval capabilities to escort ships. That will change over the next coming weeks, but even then, as long as Iran has the willingness and capacity to use their drones to disrupt the strait, you're going to continue to have elevated prices. And this is a serious problem for President Trump, because it means unless he's able to somehow destroy the regime or force them to stop their attacks, he's going to have to find a way to climb down. And as of right now, he doesn't have the capacity to get rid of the regime, absent thousands and thousands of boots on the ground. And he doesn't have the capacity to get the Iranians to stop. So that's where we are. That's also why Trump has changed the war aims. I mean, he said that he's won and he's blown up the Iranians, but obviously not enough to prevent the strait from being disrupted. Now he's calling on American allies to help him or else. But American allies didn't decide to go into this war with Trump. In fact, they weren't even given a heads up on the plan by the United States. And so now the idea that the Americans are coming to them and say, I got myself into a hole, will you help me out of it? And by the way, this is mostly your problem anyway, because I don't really need oil out of the strait. You guys do. It's a global market. Everyone needs oil out of the strait. The response from most American allies is not no, but hell no. One could imagine that the Board of Peace would be more interested in providing that support, since that's what Trump wanted to use to supplant the Security Council. But of course, those are small countries with very limited capacity, and they don't want to do this stuff either, right? It's not like Belarus is going to start sending naval capacity to help the Americans. Paraguay, Indonesia, I don't think so. And of course, the Indonesians suspended after the war in Iran actually started. Then you have the Chinese and Trump saying that he might suspend the summit. That is less of a punishment than it is, or even an inducement for the Chinese. It is much more about assuming that the war is going to continue while Trump would be in China at the end of the month, beginning of April. That's a really bad look. He doesn't want to make that trip. So, and it's very, very likely that this war is still going to be on at that point. This is, as is shown from 5,000 American troops that are on their way to the Persian Gulf. They'll be there in just under 2 weeks, and then presumably they're going to be used. And that's boots on the ground. That may well be taking over Karg Island, where all of the oil export of Iran, almost all of it, 90%, comes out of. A dangerous thing to do, a risky thing to do, but also extending the time frame of the war. Trump's not going to go to China while that's happening. And the Chinese are not going to provide naval support to engage with the Americans in clearing the strait. Everybody knows that in the United States. This is more a reason to push back what had been a summit that Trump was himself very much looking forward to. I don't think it's going to particularly destabilize U.S.-China relations, but it does increasingly look like that summit meeting is not going to happen as scheduled. Your previously scheduled programming is being disrupted by this war. The broader point is that this increasingly feels a lot to me like the first weeks of the pandemic. Not as big, obviously, in terms of the global economic impact, but with massive second and third order implications that were not clear from the initial concerns, the initial news headlines. Because this is not just about oil, it's also about everything that passes through the Gulf, and the knock-on economic implications are really, really major. For example, you've got, all synthetic fabrics in Asia. So much of that is oil-based coming out of the Gulf. Auto parts, for example, packaging for consumer goods. And it's going to take a while before that plays through into prices, but it is going to happen. So this is a global supply chain shock that over the next months, everyone around the world is going to feel. Much worse on the poorest countries, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, for example, than it is in the United States and Europe, but it's a hit to absolutely everyone. And that consequence is going to get much worse and much more extended every day that this war goes on. Fertilizer, so much of fertilizer passes through and emanates from the Gulf. And we're in planting season, and there, you get past May, June with disruptions of when the ports are actually taking that product that hasn't come out of the Gulf, and that means you're going to have less food being produced, and that means that food prices are going to be higher. And so the impact of this on the global economy, I think, is much greater than what is generally being presumed and written in the headlines, and this is going to play out in the United States on Trump's agenda for the midterm elections. And, the biggest surprise here is for a guy who, really does focus on branding and comms, is that he really doesn't have a way to sell this to the American public. He's trying to find a message that's going to work, and he doesn't have one. He's trying to find someone to blame. He's like, well, NATO, you got to help me, because if you don't help me, I'm out. Well, what's he going to do? He's going to stop helping on Ukraine? That's really hard. The Ukrainians right now are doing much more for the United States on the Gulf than anyone in Europe is. They're providing interceptors, and they're training Gulf allies to help deal with this Iranian threat. Trump really needs that. So it's not going to be easy for him to suddenly say, I'm cutting off all the support that's going to Ukraine, all those weapons that are being sold, for example, the intelligence that's being provided. Don't think that's going to happen. China, is he going to suddenly beat the Chinese up if they aren't going to help on the strait? I don't think so. He needs a good relationship with China because of the impact on the U.S. economy of those critical minerals and all the rest. We've seen that play out post-Liberation Day. So he doesn't really have anyone external to blame. And internally, this is his decision, and he's been doing the comms on it. J.D. Vance had nothing to do with it, wouldn't have wanted to make this decision. Marco Rubio was much more cautious. It was Trump that was over the top saying, I want to go now, I want to go big. So, maybe he can get rid of Hegseth, which on balance would be a useful thing since he's not very competent, but it's extremely hard to figure out who Trump blames other than himself. And of course, he's not going to blame himself. So how do you declare a win? And is it credible? Is it coherent? And when does it happen? Which is why it increasingly looks like, from the U.S. perspective, escalation is more likely than not. From the Israeli perspective, escalation in Lebanon, as well as with this Iranian regime, seems more likely than not. And from the Iranian perspective, at this point, continuing the fight, including potentially escalation with terrorist attacks that can happen. They export terror. You've got lone wolf inspired attacks that can happen. You've got cyber attacks we've already seen in the United States on major multinational health device, medical device company emanating from Iran. The Houthis, if they were to get involved, would disrupt the Red Sea, where a lot of the oil that's presently bypassing the Strait of Hormuz is coming through. So, I mean, the baseline right now for the coming weeks, at least, is frankly more negative than not. And it's hard to see how you would somehow get a ceasefire or somehow manage to get some kind of effective diplomacy going. I think that we should still hope for that. And I think the best thing for Trump to do, given those scenarios, would be to stop now and declare victory. But I don't think he is going to do that. And so we're going to watch this continue to play out. So anyway, that's where we are. That is, and I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more to talk about every day and going forward, and we'll do that. We'll continue to monitor it. But for now, those are my views, and I'll talk to you all real soon.